What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank, and tonight I want to talk about ADOS and FBA and the one thing that they are missing, the one thing that they don't take in consideration. The reason why I want to talk about it is because I made a post earlier today because it was this great picture, you know, of well, I don't know who the quote is by. It was a great picture of a lion and a lion cub, right? And the lion cub is in the front, and the lion, the full-grown lion, was in the back, right? And it said the lion cub was the diaspora, and the lion was Africa, right? And it was such a great visual quote. It said so many things, and I think that is the one thing that FBA and ADOS are missing when it comes to, you know, the struggle, right? I want to say the struggle, because to be honest, to be truthfully honest, ADOS, FBA, and Pan-Africans, we actually have 99% of the same. Matter of fact, we pretty much have 100% of the same goals. We have 99% of the same problems. Our issues are the same. FBA, ADOS, and Pan-African issues are the same issues. We are all talking about and struggling against the same machine, and we're all looking for mechanisms at which, you know, to fight against that machine, right? FBA, and I'm discluding pretendians. All right, we're talking about FBA. These people who know they black, right? I'm talking about not the ones, the FBA and ADOS, who want to be some sort of indigenous something. Not those pseudo guys. I'm talking about real African Americans who are descendant of Africans who were brought over here from the transatlantic slave trade and decided to take on the moniker of ADOS or FBA, right? Now, I understand that there are elements within the FBA and ADOS who are very combative against other Africans who are combative against us. And it's true. There are other Africans from the Caribbean and Africa who talk a lot of trash, and they talk real greasy about African Americans, right? And they don't take in consideration that any success that they have in America is due to us African Americans laying down the foundation for them to succeed. And, you know, I can't really blame them for being upset and combating them when they encounter these continental Africans or these Caribbeans, other diasporan Africans who like to pick on the African American, right? Unfoundedly, because we don't do anything to these people, for real. They pick on us. But because we have some fighting back and some are not as mature as others, they say rude, mean, and xenophobic and hateful things towards them, right? So what happens is the movement of FBA, they have a goal. FBA has a goal. ADOS has a goal, right? And their goal is to get reparations, right? That's something that they're fighting for, right? And other things to liberate black people. Now, I want you guys to understand that Pan-Africans are the ones who started and championed the fight for reparations. Real Pan-Africans want reparations, period, right? And any person calling themselves a Pan-African and saying they're fighting against reparations, or they talking trash or making fun of those groups that seek reparations, they're not a Pan-African. And that's another problem that we have, is that FBA and ADOS also run into people calling themselves Pan-African who don't know the first thing about being Pan-African. See, the first thing, Pan-Africans are unifiers, right? Unifiers, right? So even though we do get in arguments with different groups, ultimately we're supposed to unify. As a Pan-African, I'm supposed to look at FBA, which is my group, even though I don't, you know, go with the name. I'm an African American. You call yourself what you want, whatever you like. But as an African American, Pan-African, my goal is to look for those reasonable FBA and ADOS who knows for a fact that they are African, but they subscribe to, and they subscribe to their tribe of African Americans as a group, and they want to hold on to that group, which is no problem. I'm an African American. I want to hold on to my African American group too. I mean, we earned it, right? In blood, we earned it in blood. So it's our thing, right? Like I always say, African Americans are a combination of various different African people groups who were forced to unite under oppression. All right? We are what unification looks like. African Americans are what a unified Africa looks like. If you were to take a unified Africa and squish it down to a tribe, that's the African American tribe. That's what we are, right? But real Pan-Africans is supposed to be reaching out to groups like FBA and ADOS, right? Now, and it doesn't matter who their leaders are, whether they say that's the leader or they don't say that's the leader, whatever. The members of FBA and ADOS, Pan-Africans are supposed to be reaching out to FBA and ADOS and being like, all right, FBA, ADOS, on the domestic front, what do we agree on? Let's all unify under that. Because there's nothing a Pan-African really should disagree with when it comes to FBA and ADOS. There's absolutely nothing that a Pan-African should disagree with when it comes to the ideologies or the thinkings of FBA and ADOS, to be honest, right? When it comes to the overall mission. Now, FBA and ADOS shouldn't really have anything against Pan-Africanism. The only thing that happens is you get one person talking shit, and everybody talking shit, and you know how human beings, we clan up, right? We click up. So you got your FBA clique, fighting against the ADOS clique, fighting against the Pan-African clique, fighting against the pretending clique, right? But in actuality, it's really just all of us Africans finding groups that's strong enough to fight, the good fight, right? Now, the fact remains, Pan-Africanism is the biggest, it's an umbrella group. That means if you're FBA and ADOS and you're fighting for the liberation of African Americans, you also can fight and honor and support other African diasporas fighting for their own liberation too. So it doesn't, to be a ADOS and FBA and have pride in your African American heritage doesn't mean your pride means you have to shit on other groups or try to be like, oh, my group's better than your group. What we need to have is an understanding that we as African Americans are a unique group of people, just like Jamaicans are a unique group of people. We all came from the same place, but because of where we landed, we got unique stories, and those stories should be respected, right? And and honored, right? And we can be proud African Americans. You can be a proud ADOS, a proud FBA, and still support your Jamaicans and your Haitians and your Nigerians and your Ethiopians in their fight. Now, when it comes to people talking trash, of course, there's always going to be people talking trash. There's always going to be immature people within the groups, right? There's going to be immature Pan-Africans. As we know, there is one who, for some reason, he calls himself a Pan-African, and he's the main one who most of you guys, FBA ADOS, hate. But keep in mind, that guy's not a Pan-African. I want you to remember that the guy that makes you hate Pan-Africanism is not a Pan-African. So to hate him, it should be just hate him individually because he doesn't represent Pan-Africanism. And y'all know who I'm talking about because y'all hate him the most, right? He's not a Pan-African. You get it? I'm a Pan-African. He's not a Pan-African. I'm a Pan-African. He's not a Pan-African. You should discern the difference. You can look, you can Google it, right? There's several different definitions that you can see who fits that mold. Clearly, that other guy does not fit the definition of Pan-Africanism. But we can't control what people like to call themselves, right? So we have to use our brains, our intelligent African brains that got us through all the shit that we've been through. This intelligent brain of ours, we got to use it to separate and discern who's real and who's not. Who should be taken seriously and who's not. All those Africans talking shit about African Americans, they're low informational people. They should not be taken seriously. They should not. They're either jealous of African Americans, they have a bad experience with a particular African American. They used to date one and they had a bad relationship, or they broke up, or they got dumped, cheated on. You know how it go, right? And then they use that as a tool to go against another group because they're upset. You also got people that are keyboard warriors, and they just like to come online and talking trash. They get joy and fun out of coming on the internet, hiding behind their profiles and fake profiles and talking shit. Also, keep in mind, we have a lot of white people who pretend to be black, that go into our comment sections, that come on panels. Sometimes they can get away with it, and they antagonize the separation between our groups, right? But understand this, as a real Pan-African, I'm telling you, FBA, you can literally call yourself FBA ADOS and still be a Pan-African. Because like I said, Pan-African encompasses many different African groups, you know, under umbrella. And this is why it's important. As much as African Americans want to be respected, as much as African Americans want to build institutions here and better and improve themselves, we are going to have a hard time doing that if our homeland doesn't have the foundation and structures in order to give us the respect we need. You see, despite what we think, white people know we're African. Homeland's Africa. So if homeland of Africa is not being respected, then African Americans, any type of African, anywhere they go, is not going to be respected. That's just how it works. So no matter how you personally feel about you being an American, you know, some of you guys are more attached to the nationalistic portion of America and not to your race. Understand, your race is much bigger than this nation. Your black race dwarfs this American nation that you attach yourself to, when this American nation, which means white people, don't want to attach themselves with you unless it's you working for them for free. That's just what it is. So if African Americans truly want to gain power, right, as the fruit of Africa, they need to understand that the root, which is the continent of Africa and the people of Africa, need to be respected on the world stage. So it behooves African Americans, right, to support any Africans who are fighting for their own liberation and freedom from their traitors within their communities, you know, from their Kunarians that they got in their community. And keep this in mind for all you disgruntled African Americans who use the trope, you know, oh, they sold us into slavery. I want you to remember that it was white people, the Europeans, who enslaved us. I want you to always remember that. Don't cop out the entire group of Africans because we had some Kunarians. Keep in mind, we have Kunarians. Just like the one that you don't like so much because he always talking shit about you, right? Imagine him back then. Imagine a black conservative back in the 1500s, back in the 1300s. Imagine a black Kunarian, a black Republican type. Imagine them back in those days. They would have sold their brother and sister to get a butter biscuit from the Europeans, right? So it's the same kind of person that we encountered today is the same that we had to deal with back then. That allowed and understand the context of slavery. Slavery was what we thought was slavery in Africa was different from what the Europeans were doing. We had no idea. And I'm a historian. If you knew anything about history, you would know that we were duped into it. And the majority of the Africans that were put into the transatlantic slave trade were taken by Europeans, not traded by European kingdoms. White people went in and stole children. Keep this in mind. They stole children, not grown-ass men like me and you, right? They went and got the kids because you can fit more kids in the boat, all right, than a bunch of adults, and they're easier to handle. You think a ship full of white boys can handle a ship full of grown-ass men like myself when they're outnumbered freaking 10 to 1? I don't think so. No, that's not how it works. So you guys gotta kind of like get over your slight xenophobia. Just learn a little bit about history and see what happens. Because remember, I'm telling you, this is a fact. For every one of the Africans taken into this transatlantic slave trade, right? That's an African family that lost a mother, a brother, a sister, a cousin, a mom, a brother. So when they ripped us apart, that's two pieces. So every one of us Africans have family in West and Central Africa right now. We don't know where they are. Now one day when people do more of their DNA, it'll pop up. Because one of mine's popped up in Ghana. Never been to America. My DNA blood relation. You know, eventually people are going to find out. Not everybody will, but eventually people are going to find out. But understand that history is way more complicated than the simplistic idea, oh, Africans sold Africans into slavery. That's not what happened. And if you want to go that route, keep in mind the same tactics that was used, right? The same Kunarians that was used to snatch up just a few Africans, right? The collaborators, when the same technique was used in America. the Europeans used Native Americans who didn't like other Native American kingdoms and tribes. They used other Native Americans to get other Native Americans. They used other Native Americans to persecute other Native Americans. But right now, the Native Americans are united, even though they have historical issues with each other, right? There's Native Americans that can make the same claim about other groups of Native Americans to say, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have lost our entire continent. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be relegated to just a reservation, you know, in the middle of America, in the freaking desert. If it wasn't for you, but that will get them nowhere, placing blame within them when both of them were tricked. Same thing happened in Japan when the Europeans went to Japan, right? There were Japanese collaborators, Kunarians, who facilitated the Europeans to take over Japan and do what they did. They were facilitators. Just like we got Kunarians, they got Kunarians too, right? How do you think it happened in we did Africa, Native Americans, Asians, India? You think all the Indian kingdoms were together? No, they were fighting each other. Europeans went in, they pit certain Indian groups against other Indian groups. They had Indian collaborators that cared more about the payola than their actual people, and they used them, and they put a lot of Indians into bondage and spread them around the world after they couldn't do it with us. So the tactic that the Europeans used on us, they've used on everybody else. But what you don't hear is Indian people saying, oh, you Indian people put us into slavery. You don't hear Indian Native Americans saying, oh, you Native Americans, if it wasn't for you doing this to us, we would still have our country, our continent. You don't hear Japanese people fighting each other because they say, oh, if this Japanese clan didn't collaborate with the English, then we wouldn't have to deal with all this blah, 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 this stuff. You don't hear them doing that because they understand the context of their history. African people need to understand the context of our history, understand we were tricked the same way everybody else in the world were tricked by that European. That doesn't change the love you should have for your continent. You shouldn't have hate for your continent when you have no problem getting on that plane going to Europe. You don't have no problem working with the people that ancestors enslaved your ancestors. You got no problem with marrying them. You got no problem with hanging out with them. So you've given the European, the actual antagonist, the actual one who did it, the actual group of people, you give them a total pass, you put them behind you, and you don't even look at their indiscretion, and you want to focus on the other victims. You want to focus on the low-hanging fruit because it's easier to do that, especially when you don't have context of history. So I implore FBAs, ADOSs, and Pan-Africans, I implore you to calm yourselves down from the wars of ideas, calm yourself down from the clique wars, and start trying to come together on the things that we agree with, which is 99.99% of everything. Pan-Africans, just so you FBAs and ADOS guys know, Pan-Africans are not telling you have to move to Africa. Pan-Africans are telling you should look at Africa. You should visit Africa if you can. You should invest in Africa if you can. And you should think about Africa being a place that you can go to benefit yourself if you can. But if not, you can stay in America. You can build in America. But you should have support. You should be in good relations with your African brothers and sisters because we may need backup. Nobody on this planet is our friend. So we don't have time to be creating extra beefs with other black people when we know the whole world not only consumes us, not only are jealous of us, they sweat us, but they hate us because they can't beat us. So we can't never trust them when it comes to certain things. We can only trust each other, but we got to get along. So I implore FBA to get away from some xenophobic tendencies, because xenophobic tendencies are just like tribalistic tendencies. The same way the Yoruba and the Igbo are fighting in Nigeria is the same way we fighting here. Ideas, different cliques and groups, even though we're the same group of people, because we clicked up this way and clicked up this way, we over here fighting each other unnecessarily, and we're wasting time, we're wasting resources, and we're wasting energy battling each other when we agree on 99.99% of everything. The only thing we don't agree on is Pan-Africans are anti-xenophobic because we're pro-African world. So when we hear people being xenophobic, that goes against our overall mission of unification if people are promoting separation. Because separate, you're weak. African Americans, as strong and powerful and influential as we are, without our brothers and sisters, we are only as powerful as our 40+ million people in this country. We're only as strong as the two institutions we are allowed to build within the institution of the persecutor that we are dealing with. Understand, it's hard to build a foundation on somebody else's foundation. At least in Africa, you can build a foundation on your own foundation. You can build a foundation somewhere where the slate is clean, where it's away from the European, where you can build in peace and comfort. And then you can take that money built from the foundation, you can bring that back to America and empower your people here to take over the institutions that we once were subservient to. That's all I'm saying. So Pan-Africans are like the foreign policy group of the Africans, right? FBA and ADOS are the domestic department of the Africans. We need each other. It's important that we collaborate with each other. It's important that we get along. We have to start moving the conversation to the point where we get along. We got too many enemies. We got too much shit to do, and this is our opportunity to really win. But we have to coordinate, okay? We got to coordinate. All this fighting does nothing but entertain our enemies. Entertain our enemies, who are definitely afraid of our unification. That's the scariest thing to them, is our unification. So let's give it to them. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right? So I implore all my reasonable FBAs and ADOS, you know, make contributions in my comment section. You know, let's have a conversation. You know, let's talk and let's find the places where which is 99.99% of everything that we agree on, right? And then you can listen to, you know, real Pan-Africans who explain to you the overall ideology of Pan-Africanism and how you fit within that system. Anyway, that's all I got to say. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach them. I'm out.